Good morning, everybody. It is 7 o'clock. When is a party not a party? Downing Street has consistently denied any such event took place just before Christmas last year, when social mixing indoors was banned in the capital. Yet leaked footage shows the Prime Minister's then press secretary and his advisor joking about a Downing Street Christmas event with cheese and wine. Normally at this point I'd tell you who's joining us from the government to answer questions put by me for you on your behalf, but despite assurances we'd have a minister with us, no one appears to be available. But with plenty of reaction from those who'd like some answers. Also this morning for you, she's the woman who broke the glass ceiling and became one of the FBI's top serial killer specialists. We'll speak with pioneering forensic nurse Anne Walbert Burgess. And
the impact of music therapy for Patsy has given her opportunity. It's been amazing, life-changing, in fact.
Discussing the return of the Nordhoff Robbins Christmas concert as we talk with the families with autistic children that they help. It's Wednesday, the 8th of December. Party politics calls for resignations in Downing Street after leaked footage shows staff discussing an apparent gathering there last Christmas.
I've just seen reports on Twitter that there was a Downing Street Christmas party on Friday night. Do you recognise those reports?
I went home.
Just how festive was the cheer behind the doors of Number 10? Several of the PM staff facing calls to quit over claims of celebrations while the nation was under lockdown. What next?
The Prime Minister needs to step up, accept what happened and apologise. Unfortunately, we've got a Prime Minister who is socially distanced from the truth.
Plus, the Department of Education admits that the former Education Secretary Gavin Williamson arranged an office celebration at his office last December. A year on, we mark the anniversary of the first coronavirus vaccine being administered in the UK.
While there are celebrations to mark the breakthrough, some scientists are warning about the growing dangers of the new Omicron variant.
COVID fraud. Sky News reveals fake vaccine passports, which could allow tourists to enter the UK. They're on sale across Europe.
I'm live here in Porthcawl for day 2 of Storm Barra. The highest wind speeds in Wales yesterday, 86 miles per hour.
The boycott builds. Australia joins the United States in its diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics.
Good morning. PMQ should be an incredibly good watch this lunchtime, with Boris Johnson facing questions about what exactly happened inside Number 10 a week before Christmas last year. The government's consistently denied that a party took place, saying no rules were broken while the country was under strict lockdown. Yet, leaked footage has emerged showing the PM's then press secretary and top advisers joking about reports of a party, a cheese and wine event, in fact, with no social distancing. Now, normally we'd ask a government minister about this. We were told originally that it was going to be the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, because, of course, it's the first anniversary of the first vaccine being administered. But now we've been told that, sadly, no one's actually accepted our invitation. We've not even had a proper RSVP. Never mind, here's our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates.
Do you think this Christmas is going to be considerably better than last Christmas? Yeah!
The Prime Minister proudly kicking off the festive period, turning on the Christmas lights with school children in Downing Street last week, laughing off questions about a party said to have been held in this very street behind this very door last year. Allegra Stratton, who was to become the Prime Minister's press secretary, appearing on TV, now in new footage obtained by ITV News. She's seen rehearsing for that role, being asked some difficult questions about a Downing Street Christmas party that the inhabitants claimed didn't happen. But listen to the tone.
I've just seen reports on Twitter that there was a Downing Street Christmas party on Friday night. Do you recognise those reports?
I went home. Hold on.
Would the Prime Minister condone having a Christmas party?
What's the answer?
I don't know.
It wasn't a party, it was cheese and wine.
Is cheese and wine all right? No. It was a business meeting.
I'm
joking.
This is recorded. His fictional party was a business meeting. And it was not socially distanced. One more, and then ask anybody have any questions today?
There are plenty more questions. Asked about the party, she says she went home. But from what? And does saying the alleged party was not socially distanced amount to a confession? Each answer leads to a new question.
Last year at Christmas, the public followed the rules, and many of them didn't see their loved ones over Christmas. Some of them didn't see their loved ones again. They had the right to expect the government to follow the rules. And we now know the government broke the rules, they partied, and now they're laughing about it. They're treating the public with contempt. The Prime Minister needs to step up, accept what happened, and apologise. Unfortunately, we've got a Prime Minister who is socially distanced from the truth.
Tory MPs are furious.
This is like something out of In the Thick of It. If you wrote it, people wouldn't believe it. Boris Johnson has always been his own man and done his own thing in his own way. I think he has a certain amount of explaining to do.
The leader of the SNP in Westminster has actually called for Boris Johnson to go over this.
Boris Johnson has to resign. You know, everybody followed the COVID rules last year. People were told by the government, by Boris Johnson, what they were expected to do. I'm hearing from constituents tonight that are just, frankly, ashamed of what has happened here.
Ashamed, but angry too. The anger of those who lost loved ones to COVID named on this wall opposite Parliament.
The fact that this party took place is compounding the awfulness. I can't begin to tell you how the 160,000 families who have been bereaved by this virus are feeling right now when we see the contempt with which our loved ones' lives and our lives are treated by this government. It's despicable.
It's bad enough that this alleged event involved 36 people from Downing Street, different departments inside Number 10, some people coming in specially from home in order to attend, I'm told. It's bad enough that it took place 2 days after London went into the most severe form of restrictions, known as Tier 3. What's really worrying Tories tonight, however, is the spectacle of Downing Street aides laughing about an event that they now deny took place, mocking the very rules that caused such heartache a year ago.
Boris Johnson took away the nation's liberties because of COVID. If it turns out we weren't all in this together, there could be painful consequences. Sam Coates, Sky News.
OK, so let's just remind you how we got to this point, should we? There have been continual denials by Cabinet Ministers since the first allegation of an illegal Christmas party in Downing Street. On the 30th of November, the Daily Mirror reported the Prime Minister gave a speech at a leaving party where staff drank wine and took part in a quiz and a Secret Santa. The next day, on the 1st of December, Mr Johnson was asked about the allegations at Prime Minister's Questions by Keir Starmer. 3 times, Mr Johnson refused to explicitly deny a party had taken place. By the 3rd of December, the Conservative Party chair, there he was, Oliver Dowden, said the Prime Minister had been very clear that the rules were obeyed at all times. Here we go. On Sunday, the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, told us here at Sky News that claims of a party were unsubstantiated. And ever since that initial report, ministers have consistently denied that a party had taken place. Talk to me about what on earth happened at this party that we keep hearing about at Number 10. On Sunday, you said that police don't normally, quoting you, don't normally look back and investigate things that have taken place a year ago. Yesterday, we had the policing minister on the programme. He said we should be investigating anything that is a historic crime to them. The police should be investigating that. Where are we today?
Well, so my quote was directly from what the Metropolitan Police said. This is a matter for them. They said that in relation to COVID regulations, they wouldn't routinely investigate retrospective breaches. So I was simply pointing to what the police themselves have said. Number 10 have been very clear. There was no party. There's been no breach of the rules.
The police get reports all day, every day of things that have happened, and they make a judgment about that. And it would be wrong for me, as the policing minister, to seek to have a view about a particular police investigation. You know, we don't generally comment on those things. But you know, we are assured that, or I've been assured that everything was done
yesterday, and didn't he?
At the time,
the Justice Secretary did yesterday, and also Deputy Prime Minister. He said if any rules were broken. Then if there was a breach of the rules, then it should be investigated. And if it happened, indeed, is what he said. But if it did happen, it would be a breach of Tier 3 rules. Surely, if a crime potentially had been committed, it should at least be looked into by the police.
Well, you're asking me to answer a hypothetical question about this issue. But my general view is that where crime is reported, the police should investigate.
Well, as you can imagine, the story has made the front pages of the newspapers this morning. A sick joke. That's how the Daily Mail describes the leaked footage of the Prime Minister's former spokesperson, Allegra Stratton, at a rehearsal press briefing, joking about the idea of a Christmas party at Downing Street last year. Guardian also leads with the story as the accusations of lying continue to be fired at Boris Johnson, with the Metro describing the officials in the video as number 10 party clowns. The Financial Times talks of Keir Starmer condemning the PM, accusing him of having contempt for voters. And in the Mirror, it's a different Tory MP coming under fire as they lead on an exclusive about the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, hosting his own Christmas party last year. His spokesperson has admitted and said that the incident was unfortunate. Well, it seems the Downing Street party has become a prime-time joke, with even Anton Deck getting in on the act on last night's I'm a Celebrity.
It is all change in Camp Nou, though, because yesterday the celebs chose a new leader via the gift of a secret vote.
And that means David's reign is over. But they weren't celebrating.
No.
They didn't have a party. They categorically deny any suggestions that they had a party. And this fictional party definitely didn't involve cheese and wine or a secret Santa.
Evening, Prime Minister. For now.
That's what you call cut-through. And despite the lockdown rules, it appears another member of the Cabinet may have held an office Christmas party last year. As we were just hearing, the Mirror claiming the former Education Secretary hosted a party and gave a speech on the 10th of December when mixing between households had been banned. In a statement, the Department of Education says a gathering took place to thank staff for working during the pandemic. They said, looking back, it would have been better not to have gathered in this way. And, goes on, footage has emerged of a current Cabinet Minister appearing to mock the allegations of a Christmas party in Downing Street. The video seems to show the Leader of the House of Commons, Jacob Rees-Mogg, joking about last year's rules.
I see we're all here obeying regulations, aren't we? I mean, this party is not going to be investigated by the police in a year's time. You are all very carefully socially distanced. We've moved, I'm pleased to tell you, from the metric back to the imperial system. I know you were at least 2 inches of regulation, which is, as I understand it, what the regulations require.
Now, it's claimed that the party took place in Downing Street on the 18th of December last year. Just hours after it is said to have taken place, the Prime Minister announced millions of people, including in London, would be going back into lockdown.
Yesterday afternoon, I was briefed on the latest data that shows the virus spreading more rapidly in London, the south east and the east of England than would be expected, given the tough restrictions that are already in place. We will introduce new restrictions in the most affected areas, specifically those parts of London, the south east and the east of England, which are currently in Tier 3.
Joe is with us this morning. Good morning, Joe.
Morning.
Was there a party? Was there not a party? And also, could there have been a party and the Prime Minister not have known about it?
I suppose it's possible. What is so confusing about this is that the denials, as we've seen on your programme in recent weeks, was so clear, and yet this video also seems to suggest that the complete opposite may have been the case. And the Downing Street line they were using last night and for the past few weeks is still the one they are using. I've spoken to a press officer at Downing Street. They say that the line is still, there was no Christmas party, COVID rules have been followed at all times. How long can they stick to that line? How long do you think it's credible they still argue nothing happened? And if nothing happened, why was everyone at that press conference joking about it? It's very, very awkward. It's also strange that there is no minister on the morning round this morning. Kay, that is very, very rare that there is no government minister put up to answer the questions of you and other broadcasters. Certainly the Health Secretary was briefly due to come on this programme and on other programmes this morning because it's 1 year since Margaret Keenan was the first person in the world to receive a COVID vaccine outside of clinical trials. Well, that was cancelled, and other ministerial visits with media access today have also been cancelled. That doesn't just suggest that the government are unsure who their messenger should be at this difficult time, but what their key message is. Now, they're running out of time to try and find a key message, an excuse, a justification, because Boris Johnson is due at Prime Minister's questions at 12. Keir Starmer 100% will have spent yesterday evening and will be spending this morning polishing his jokes, his barbs, his zingers to really try and take advantage of this seeming moment of weakness on the part of Boris Johnson and the government.
Prime Minister's had his back against the wall in the past, if indeed that's how he's viewing it this morning. And he's always come out smelling of roses. One wonders what sort of damage this might cause him.
I think it possibly will cause him damage in terms of his leadership, in terms of poll ratings. But what is perhaps more worrying is the damage it could cause to confidence in the government's pandemic strategy. If, and it is possible, if we have further restrictions and this affects the willingness of the public to comply with restrictions, that clearly could be dangerous for public health. To be fair to the Prime Minister, there hasn't been any suggestion that he was at this party, a little bit like the Dominic Cummings Barnard Castle scandal. He wasn't there. It was somebody that he worked with who perhaps he should have managed in a different way. So this is not a scandal at the Prime Minister's front door, even if it took place behind his front door. But it doesn't paint a good picture of his grasp of detail and his leadership of these people who are seemingly having fun when they shouldn't have been. And
what about as far as the Met is concerned? What are they saying about all this?
Well, they have released a statement saying that they are aware of this and will look into it. It's awkward for them because, of course, the police surround that building, right? The Met guard at Downing Street. Some may argue, could they have had no awareness of what was happening there, Kay? It's difficult. They're in a difficult position, and it's always very difficult for the Met Police when they're talking about holding those who they guard and work for to account. It's an awkward relationship, but it's possible that they'll look into it. Yeah, I mean, they're guarding this street at this very second.
Yeah, all the lights are on. Interestingly, I'm guessing there's a lot of brain power behind the door at number 10 this morning, wondering how to deal with this. I think it was Alistair Campbell, was it, who said, if you're on the front pages for 5 days about one story, it's a bit of a challenge.
And that's the question, what happens next? There have been lots of off-record accounts of what happened, including the fact that there was a WhatsApp message a week in advance and a follow-up email, which suggests it was premeditated, it was organised, it was arranged. Could there be people on record speaking about taking part in that party? Could there be photos? Could there be videos? That would move the story on further. And I think certainly whatever happens at midday in the House of Commons will move this story on further because Boris Johnson has to try and justify it.
Yeah, number of the day today is 691, the number of people who died in hospital the day that video that we've shown to you this morning was taken. Thank you very much indeed. We'll talk to you later, get your take on it as well at 9 o'clock. Meantime, Boris Johnson due to face, as we were hearing there from Joe, MPs at Prime Minister's questions this lunchtime. There'll be full coverage on Sky News from midday. You can have a ringside seat if you'd like to. I bet you do. Now, still to come on the programme, 1 year ago since the very first COVID vaccine was given, and we are any closer to ending the pandemic? We'll be asking that of Dr. Catherine Smallwood from the World Health Organization. She's joining us shortly. We'll talk to the boss of University Hospital Coventry, a year since they made history by giving Margaret Keenan the world's first COVID-19 vaccine. 12 days after Storm Arwen, and we'll hear from the village in northern England where homes either have no power or just a temporary electricity supply. So, as I was saying, it's exactly a year since Margaret Keenan became the first person in the world to get a COVID vaccine. Tens of millions have been given since then. This morning, though, scientists in South Africa are warning some current vaccines may be less effective against the latest Omicron strain. A warning this report from Sky's Ivor Bennett contains flash photography from the beginning.
Just going to be squeezing your arm, OK?
90-year-old Margaret Keenan was the first to receive a coronavirus vaccine from the NHS a year ago to the day. The number of doses given since then is nearly 120 million. It's a remarkable achievement made possible by the hard work of people like Dr Anil Mehta, a GP in East London whose clinic alone has administered 35,000 jabs, staying open each night and every weekend.
It's been turbulent, it's been full of anxiety, and it's now exhaustion. So it's a mixture of all those emotions that I've never felt before working here day in, day out for 25 years. That's the magnitude of what we're talking about.
Stadiums, cinemas, churches and mosques have played their part too, among the numerous venues transformed in the biggest vaccination drive in NHS history.
The scale of the vaccine rollout has been staggering. Nearly 3,000 sites like this have been established across the country, involving more than 200,000 NHS staff and volunteers. But that's the last 12 months. The question now is, what will the next 12 bring?
The immediate focus is on ramping up the booster programme to tackle the Omicron variant, with the NHS launching a major recruitment drive to find tens of thousands new staff and volunteers. But at this site in Stratford, East London, they're struggling to find patients. Even among the vulnerable, booster take-up is low.
We were doing 1,500 a day in the peak around January, February time last year. Now we're sort of only doing about 500 a day at the moment, and that's because patients aren't coming forward, unfortunately. There's two reasons, I think. One is that people feel that they have had their first and second vaccinations and they're fully protected. And then there's the Omicron variant, which people feel, well, the vaccine might not work for that. But we know that the vaccine is likely to at least help with the defence against Omicron.
But how much protection and for how long still isn't clear. Early lab tests from South Africa suggest the Pfizer jab may be up to 40 times less effective against Omicron than the original COVID strain. And with more variants expected next year, scientists say more boosters may be needed too.
We will probably need to boost again, and by then we'll know a lot about our current vaccines and the vaccines that are still to be approved, and I'm sure we will be tweaking them and going through a round of vaccination again. Just like with flu, we'll be doing a top-up vaccine sometime next winter.
It is an unwelcome reminder the pandemic is far from over yet. A year from the first jab, it seems we're a long way from the last. Ivor Bennett, Sky News.
Well, our health correspondent Ashish Joshi is in Coventry for us this morning. Good morning to you, Ashish. We've come such a long way in a year, but from what we're hearing this morning in South Africa, still a long way to go.
Yes, that's a reminder, if one were needed, that the vaccine which offered us so much hope exactly a year ago today, that there is some way to go to finally seeing out this pandemic. We may be in a position where we will be taking boosters for years to come, and that's the nature of the coronavirus. Today, Margaret Keenan, the first patient, she'll be here telling us about the year she's had, and also Maid Parsons, the first nurse who administered that vaccine. She's here too, talking about the challenges that she and her staff have faced over what's been a very difficult year for the National Health Service. The question now, Kate, is do we go back to what we saw at the beginning of the vaccine rollout? Will we see mass vaccination centres try to ramp up the booster programme? Because that really does seem to be effective against the new Omicron variant. Some results coming from South Africa yesterday saying, or suggesting at least, it's a very small sample study, but the first scientific tests on Omicron suggesting there was a degree of vaccine evasion. Now, that will worry the scientists, but the manufacturers are convinced that they can tweak their vaccines to deal with even this variant.
OK, for now, thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Looking at the latest daily COVID data for you, it's looking something like this. 45,691 new cases of COVID-19 recorded in the last 24 hours. Another 180 deaths have been reported within 28 days of a positive test. That brings the total number of deaths in the UK to 145,826. 19,979 people received their first dose of a vaccine, while 25,012 people received their second dose. That means the total number of people to have received their second doses is more than 46.5 million. Almost 330,000 booster and third jabs were given in the latest 24-hour period, taking the total number of those doses to more than 20 million. Also this morning, Sky News has seen evidence that some vaccine certificates and passes, which could be used by people coming into the UK, are fake. We've discovered, that false documents are being advertised for sale in at least 9 European countries. Kate Bunfield is in the newsroom for us this morning. Hello to you, Kate. Good morning. So what more do we know about these fake vaccine passports?
Good morning, Kay. Well, as you say, Sky News data unit has uncovered some really worrying evidence that criminals are capitalising on stricter coronavirus rules being introduced across Europe. And what these criminal gangs appear to be doing are selling fake EU digital COVID certificates. And what they are basically a pass that people in Europe can get on their phone, for instance, with a QR code that proves that they are vaccinated or have had a negative test. And the problem is that people can actually use these passes to fill out the UK's passenger locator form. So people theoretically could be coming here without actually having had a vaccination or a negative test at all. Now, this investigation has also uncovered evidence that disinformation about vaccines are being used to sell these passes. So posts like this one, for example, advertising COVID passes in countries close to the UK like Belgium and France, describe the passes as the alternative to getting vaccinated. And many adverts also use misinformation about the side effects of vaccines to convince users to pay for fake COVID passes. This one, for example, states that jabs lead to death. Well, Sky News Data and Forensics Unit has found adverts for these passes in 9 European countries. Adverts were found posted in groups of more than 100,000 users, with some advertisers claiming to be doctors. Passes are typically listed for around €300, that's £255 at a time, with untraceable payments like Bitcoin being offered, and it is a growing problem, with the Austrian government warning they detected 500 fake passes in November as they introduced new COVID restrictions. Well, Sky News has spoken to police officers in Italy who are working with disinformation units like this, and they say they are now investigating.
OK, thanks a lot, Katie. Thank you. The Australian Prime Minister says his country will join the United States in a diplomatic boycott of next year's Beijing Winter Olympics. Let's get more detail from our Asia correspondent Tom Cheshire, who's in Beijing. Tom, we've been talking about this all week, and the pressure, political pressure, certainly is continuing to ratchet up.
It really is. I don't think Australia is necessarily a surprise, Kay. The relations between China and Australia at an all-time low. Australia had the temerity to suggest there should be an independent investigation into the origins of COVID-19, and China reacted furiously, put all sorts of tariffs on imports. Very hard to find a bottle of Australian red wine here in Beijing. So Scott Morrison coming out and saying that he would be joining this diplomatic boycott. It's not a full sporting boycott. The athletes will be there. Isn't a surprise. He referenced the relationship between the two countries, but also China's human rights abuses as he described them. Here's what he had to say a bit earlier.
I very much separate the issues of sport and these other political issues. They're issues between two governments. And I would like to see those issues resolved, but they are not resolved. Australia will not step back from the strong position we've had standing up for Australia's interests, and consistent with that position, then obviously it is of no surprise that we wouldn't be sending Australian officials to those games.
China's not having any of that. Its embassy in Canberra said that, as everyone knows, Australia is solely responsible for the current plight of Sino-Australia relations, and Australia's decision not to send officials to the Beijing Winter Olympics runs counter to its public statements of so-called hopes that China-Australian relations could improve. So we've seen the US do this, and we've seen Australia do it, I think, for different reasons. Now, the focus is going to be on the UK, which is in a bit of a more difficult space. You've got the US, which is a very powerful country. It can do what it wants. Australia thinking maybe it doesn't have anything to lose. The UK is right in the middle of that, and we're still awaiting a decision on whether the UK is going to join that diplomatic boycott of the Winter Olympics.
OK, thank you. Thanks a lot. Now, after the heavy winds and heavy rains, forecasters say that Storm Barra will bring ice and freezing temperatures to much of the UK today. Winds yesterday reached speeds of 86 miles an hour. So what else could we do apart from send Enda to Porthcawl in South Wales? Hang on in there. How's it looking? Oh, goodness me. Look at all that from the sea.
Yeah, good morning, Kay. We're live here on the seafront in Porthcawl in South Wales. Day 2 of Storm Barra. And as you were saying, the highest wind speeds yesterday in Wales, across the whole of the UK, in fact, 86 miles per hour in Aberdaron in Gwynedd. So here in Porthcawl, we saw wind speeds touching 70 miles per hour yesterday. We spent a good deal of yesterday with the local RNLI crew, volunteers, and they were just monitoring conditions at sea. There were waves 7 metres high off the coast of Porthcawl yesterday, and the wind conditions made the storm conditions looking like pretty much gale force 11 off the coast of South Wales yesterday. So huge disruption across the country. One school in Llanelli yesterday, Ysgol Bryn Gwyn, had part of its roof blown off just around 4 o'clock. So thankfully the children had left the school at that point. So repairs will be getting underway there today in Llanelli. But day 2 of Storm Barra, we're still about an hour and a half away from high tide. And if I just step out of the way here, we'll leave you with a shot of just what the sea is doing. A lot of foam just blowing its way in here. But day 2 of Storm Barra, and I'm told Transport for Wales are implementing their emergency timetable. 70 train services cancelled across Wales already this morning.
That's what sea foam looks like with 70-mile-an-hour winds. Look after yourself. Thanks a lot, Enda. Thank you. What's it like for the rest of us?
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, Storm Barra may well continue to bring some disruption to Ireland and southwest Britain today, but it won't be stormy like yesterday. It's a cold, windy and showery start with snow on northern hills. But southeast England is mainly dry, rather cloudy through the morning with further showers or longer spells of rain. But there'll be some brightness in the far south. Expect more winteriness on northern hills.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still no word from Downing Street this morning following fresh allegations of a Christmas party taking place during lockdown last December. A leaked video appears to show staff discussing a party as they rehearsed a media briefing in the Downing Street press room. The briefing was being led by the Prime Minister's then spokesperson, Allegra Stratton. Joe is with us. Heard anything else from Downing Street?
Nothing at all, Kay. And there are many unanswered questions on this. Firstly, whether they're lying, that nothing happened, there was no Christmas party, will change. But if something did happen, who was there? Who was the most senior figure? Certainly reports suggest that there were many dozens of people who were there, and then could there be pressure on them? Some talk that it was just civil servants, special advisors or even ministers were there. This could be far more problematic. But as I say, Downing Street, when I spoke to them this morning, and this hasn't changed, say there was no Christmas party, COVID rules have been followed at all times. I don't think that's a sustainable position, though, is it, Kay? Especially since they don't seem to be confident enough in their position to put a minister up on the morning round to defend it. We knew that Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, was supposed to be on that round this morning talking about COVID vaccines with this one-year anniversary since Margaret Keenan got her jab. We know that other ministers have cancelled media access to their visits today, but the one person who cannot get away from scrutiny is Boris Johnson, who's up in the Commons at midday for PMQs.
OK. So how much of a challenge is this for the Prime Minister? Could he find himself in a position where he's saying, and stick to the position, I didn't know there was a party. If there was a party, this is the first I heard about it. Or is that not sustainable? And also, what about the police?
I think what his team will want to do is try and distance Boris Johnson from all of this.
Of course.
Is that possible? I mean, we don't know who was there. We don't know if he popped in to say hello and had a glass. If an event actually took place. Without knowing the details, it's hard to understand how far they can distance Boris Johnson from all of this, but they'll want to do that as much as possible. to sort of not allow him to be dragged down with it. In terms of the police, the Met have said that they are aware of the footage. It's their policy not to routinely investigate retrospective breaches. However, they say the footage that we saw last night will form part of their consideration. They're in a difficult position because they protect Downing Street, and perhaps some of their officers saw signs that a party could have been taking place.
One wonders if, I mean, and I don't know, maybe the Met will tell us, but, you know, if they didn't know that there were a lot of people inside Downing Street, why not? I suppose would be a question I would ask the Commissioner if she was on the show.
Yeah.
Maybe she'll come on. Who knows? If you're watching, Commissioner, good morning. Come and join us. We'll see you at 8 o'clock. Thanks very much indeed. Now, a year on since the first coronavirus vaccine, and there is growing concern this morning about the Omicron strain. Scientists in South Africa say some existing vaccines may be less effective against the latest mutation. With us now is the World Health Organisation's Europe COVID-19 lead, and that's Dr. Catherine Smallwood. Doctor, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. How worried is the World Health Organization about the Omicron variant? Hi, Doctor. Can you hear me okay? OK, we'll go back to the doctor in just a second. Can you hear me now, Doctor? Nope, I don't think she can. We'll go back to the doctor in just a second or two, sort that one out for you. Meantime, we will be going to Downing Street again in just a few moments' time. We should have had Sajid Javid on the programme this morning to talk about the vaccine, a year since the very first AstraZeneca vaccine was administered at a Coventry hospital. He should have been on the programme to tell us what happened then, what's happened since, what's going to happen next. A couple of times we were told he was coming on. Sadly, no one's answering the phone now, not sure why. But what we do know is that other press access to ministers has also been cancelled or postponed at events around the country today. As far as the Prime Minister is concerned, can't really get away from further scrutiny today. He will be facing the Leader of the Opposition across the dispatch box at 12 o'clock for Prime Minister's questions. Meantime, let's see if Dr. Catherine is with us now. Hello to you, Doctor.
Hi there, good morning.
Hi. Sorry about that. Those gremlins are pesky at this time in the morning. How worried are you about the Omicron variant?
We're pretty worried, which is why we declared it very quickly a variant of concern, which is our highest classification of concern for new variants of SARS-CoV-2. And that classification was warranted because we're now seeing it spread in a lot of countries around the world and in Europe, the European region in particular, where we have at least 21 countries having reported confirmed cases. And now we're seeing community transmission, quite quick spread among a handful of countries, including in the UK.
But no severe symptoms, no hospitalisations, no deaths. Is this the normal way that we see with a virus? It develops, the first strain is a big challenge. We see others that pop up and then eventually they begin to wane. Can we see this as a positive, in other words?
Well, we can't conclude that it's milder than Delta at the moment. Certainly a lot of us hope that it might be, but the evidence isn't there yet. We need to wait a little more time to understand the clinical progression in the cases that we're picking up. We've seen this spread very quickly, and we're really in a matter of 10 days since it was first identified. So we're still at the stage of looking at the clinical data. It may well turn out to result in more hospitalizations. We do have a couple of hospitalizations in the European region already of cases confirmed with Omicron. But we do have reason to believe that all of the measures that we have at our availability will still be functioning. So this is really important that people continue to do what they've been doing for COVID-19 to protect themselves and to protect others.
And it was the right decision to prevent African countries, 11 countries now, Nigeria, I think the latest one to be added to the list, to prevent them and the people of those countries from moving around the world.
Well, measures taken at borders are obviously the prerogative of member states. WHO's position is that travel bans won't prevent Omicron from spreading, and I think that's very clearly displayed that in less than a week, we have over 50 countries around the world reporting Omicron now, and it won't certainly stop the variant from spreading. It won't respect travel bans. It will continue to spread. Now, there may be some impact of increased testing increased measures around travellers that could lead to slowing that spread. But measures need to be taken at home.
If we didn't have the vaccine, where would we be today?
Well, in the UK, we would be with far, far, far higher numbers of people dying every week from COVID-19. In the European region, we've conducted a study of 33 countries, and we found that the vaccines between December and November this year saved close to 500,000 people's lives. In England, that's close or over 150,000. In Scotland, that's a high number as well. And we've seen that countries that have implemented really good vaccination campaigns where vaccination among high-risk groups have been reached quickly and to high levels have saved more lives than others. But we have to remember that saving lives and controlling transmission depends on a lot more than just the vaccination. And especially with a new variant such as Omicron that may have some level of immune escape, we need to continue to rely on everything in addition to vaccines to keep transmission under control. In the UK at the moment, the vaccines has offered the UK a huge amount of protection, but a decrease in that protection would then mean that other measures become more important.
OK, Doctor, forgive me, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us a year ago today. Thank you. Since Margaret Keenan was the first person in the world to get the AstraZeneca vaccine. Professor Andy Hardy, CEO of University Hospital Coventry and Warwickshire UHCW. Hello to you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Professor, you heard there what the representative from the WHO, the World Health Organization, had to say. A lot of acronyms this morning. Your view on where we'd be if we didn't have the vaccine?
Well, firstly, good morning, Kate. It's good to be with you. Well, quite simply and very clearly, the vaccine has been the game changer we hoped it would be. That doesn't mean the game's over, but it still is the main defence we've got against this disease and the spread of this disease. And that's why it's fantastic that we're celebrating a year on now since this first vaccine, which we were honoured to host here in Coventry. And, you know, if I've got one message today, it's that we need to ensure as many people come forward for their boosters or even their first or second doses if they haven't had it to date.
How concerned are you, Professor, about the Omicron variant?
Well, I think, as has been said, it's still very, very early days. Literally 2-3 weeks since we first heard about this variant. And it's fantastic as ever that the scientists are working to get an understanding about how transmissible it is, whether or not it escapes vaccines, and what the actual effects are in terms of symptoms and how ill people become. Early signs are hopefully encouraging. I think we do know that the vaccine, even if it's not as effective as it is against some of the other variants, it will be effective, and that's why it is really important that we keep pushing the vaccination programme. And as I said, the early signs are that it would appear that people aren't getting too ill, but it is such a small sample we've heard of so far. We just need to keep an eye on it.
And what's the current situation, Professor, as far as beds, availability as far as beds are concerned in your area?
OK, well, beds are always challenged this time of year due to winter pressures, etc. I think to put into context for COVID patients, so in my hospital, we've got 1,200 beds, of which at the moment 35 are taken up with COVID patients. And if we go back to the peak back in January, February this year, that was in excess of 260. So there are beds available. It's tight. It's always tight this time of year, and it's always a management and a measuring where we need to go on a day-to-day basis. But at the moment, we're confident that we can deal with what's coming our way.
OK, and as far as those, you said that the number of beds that were taken up with COVID patients, what sort of COVID patients are we looking at? Is it pregnant mums who've not been vaccinated? Is it older people? What are we looking at?
There's always a few number of older people, but very clearly we are starting to see an increasing proportion of our COVID patients who need hospital treatment and, importantly, critical care intervention are those who are unvaccinated. And that is true. There are a number of those who have been pregnant ladies, and of course we know that can affect both the mum and the baby. So again, it comes back to the importance of the vaccination. It does make a difference. It stops people getting hospitalised. It stops people needing critical care. It stops people needing that utmost intervention.
Have you had your booster, Professor?
I certainly have, yeah. Very proud to say I did, yeah. as soon as I could.
And to those who are a little bit concerned about having it?
I would say just speak to some professionals. Professionals are willing to talk to you, help you understand your fears, and talk through the positive sides of this. And actually, talking about pregnant ladies, that's a great example to start with. We know that the social media around both the potential effects of the vaccine on fertility and on people who are pregnant was very negative. But it's very, very clear the opposite is true now. If you're somebody who wants to become pregnant, if you are pregnant, you are so much better off in terms of your own safety and the safety of your baby to have the vaccine. So please come and get it. We are waiting here in the NHS to do as many jabs as people will come forward for.
OK, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for allowing us to visit your hospital as well today. Thank you.
Thank you.
More on our top story this morning for you now, the leaked video, which appears to show senior Downing Street staff joking about attending a Christmas office party during lockdown last December. We're joined by the Conservative MP, Sir Roger Gale. Sir Roger, thank you for joining us on the programme. I'm guessing you've seen the video. What did you make of it?
I was completely incredulous. I cannot believe it. I've said it. If this was in the thick of it, then people wouldn't believe it. It would be a joke. Unfortunately, it's not funny.
The Prime Minister, we can't say that he was there. We can't say that he knew anything about it. It could just be that he's been massively let down by his team, if indeed there was a party.
It could certainly be that he's been massively let down, but he's the Prime Minister and he ought to know. Downing Street at the moment is saying there was no party, as I understand it. I would like to hear the Prime Minister come to the dispatch box at Prime Minister's Question Time today and in answer to the questions that will no doubt be asked, say point blank, there was no party, and to say that on the record. If he says that, I will believe him, because to deliberately mislead the House, if that turned out to be the case, would be a resignation matter.
He said yesterday in a media round that there was no party, a Christmas party, and that all rules, COVID rules, had been abided by at Downing Street. Is that not enough? Or do you think that because he says it in the Palace of Westminster, that his feet are held to the fire there?
The Prime Minister has to either say there was a party, he didn't know about it, and he apologises, or he has to say on the record at the dispatch box, there was no party. We have to move forward. For why? Because if we are going to beat Omicron, then the government is going to have to take probably some further measures. People have to comply with those measures and be able to and feel that they are able to comply. And if we're getting one message from Downing Street and another message from government, then people are not going to do as they're asked. And that is serious. That means that the health service could be in trouble and people's lives could be at stake.
I think one of the concerns from people that we have spoken to is that everything seemed to be quite light-hearted in the video. People were laughing and joking about COVID restrictions. We heard Jacob Rees-Mogg, who is a very senior member of the Conservative Party, as we know. He seems to have been filmed secretly also making a joke about COVID restrictions. What's your view on that?
Well, people do make jokes. We have to remember that this was a dry run rehearsal for Allegra Stratton, apparently, and that it was Downing Street staff, not the press corps, who were asking the questions. And inevitably, under those circumstances, there's probably a degree of black humour. I understand that entirely. People are allowed to laugh occasionally. Some of us don't do it too much, maybe not enough. We are allowed to be irreverent. Doctors are irreverent. They have to be. They have to stay sane somehow. So I don't have any quarrel with that at all. What I do have a quarrel with is the idea that this party, and I'm told by sources, that food was taken in, that drink was taken in, that entertainment was had. And if that is so, that sounds to me pretty much like a party. We cannot, this is a Barnard Castle moment, potentially, isn't it? We cannot say one thing and do another. We have to be believed, we have to be trusted, because at the end of the day, we have to carry people with us to do or not do some things that may be very inconvenient indeed. And I suspect that between now and Christmas, there may be downstream more restrictions introduced. If that is so, we've got to carry the country with us in everybody's sake, for the sake of people's lives. That matters. So this background noise that's going on at the moment has to be put behind us. And the only person who can do that definitively, I believe, is the Prime Minister from the dispatch box today.
Should a minister have done what ministers always do and speak to people like me and my colleagues on other channels this morning to explain what happened and be the mouthpiece for number 10 Downing Street? Wasn't today a day to put their big boy and big girl pants on?
I don't control the media output from Conservative Central Office. I don't know how you make your bids or who you bid for. I believe in saying what I think, and I'm saying what I think. I'm prepared to do it on my own behalf. And by the way, I'm doing it on my own behalf. I'm not speaking for my colleagues or the party or anybody else. I haven't discussed it. Haven't had time. Haven't even been to the tea room this morning. So I don't know what people are saying, but I'm telling you what I think. That's as far as I'm prepared to go. I can't tell you what anybody else thinks, but I can tell you what I think.
A lot of communication on Twitter yesterday. You could say, oh, that's just Twitter, but that's where a lot of people air their views. And even last night, we saw the cut through on primetime television where two of our, much-loved treasures, British treasures, were making fun of the Prime Minister and his policies. When you get to that stage, some very hard questions have to be answered.
Well, I think some hard questions have to be answered for the sake of the nation. Because as I've said now a couple of times, we have a hard road ahead with Comicron. We have to beat it. And we have to try and enable people and business, but also in their domestic lives, to have a decent Christmas. And we can only do that if we're carrying people with us, if people understand the sense of direction. The message has to be, we've got to get people vaccinated. The clowns that haven't been vaccinated need to understand that this is important and they need to go and get vaccinated. The people who haven't had second vaccines need to have those, and the people who've had those need to get their boosters. And that is the message that we all ought to be concentrating on. Get out there and in the interests of not of yourself, but of the people around you, the people you love, get yourself vaccinated so that you don't become a conduit for Comicron. And if we can do that, then we can have a decent Christmas. That's what matters. And all this, as I said, all this background noise is getting in the way of the real message, which is what we all ought to be concentrating on.
OK. Sir Roger, I'm afraid we must leave it there, but it's very interesting to talk to you this morning. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Electricity officials in Northern England have not yet confirmed they have kept their promise to reconnect all homes cut off by Storm Arwen 12 days ago. There's concern the recovery operation will be further delayed by bad weather from Storm Barra. Joining us now, Jonathan Stott. Left without power for 10 days after Storm Arwen, he was delivered a generator after appearing on this programme a few days ago. But it hasn't been the smoothest of experiences. Hi, tell us what happened. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, Kay. As you can imagine, there's feelings of joy and a little bit of relief in the village here for us over the last couple of days. The Northern Power Grid did turn up. They provided us with a generator. It took a little while to get it set up and running, but they did deliver for us after I appeared on the news a couple of days ago. So we had power, I think, on Monday evening at about 10:20. There've been a couple of glitches. We've had to have the emergency response team dispatched just this morning to get the generator up and running. And I have heard rumblings on social media of generators running out of power and whatnot. So I think one of the key things to remember, there's a lot of communities up here who are still running on temporary power supplies, generators and so on. The problems are far from fixed, as it were. There's still clearly a lot of work to do, and Northern Power Grid can't quite relax just yet, I don't think.
How worried are you about the next storm, Storm Barra, that is coming barrelling in?
So far, we've had some fairly strong winds here. If I'm honest, nothing compared to the scale of storm that we experienced with storms 2 weeks ago. Hopefully, they won't come anywhere near it. We're very conscious of the frontline workers and engineers who are out in those, gale force winds, expected to make repairs and keep people connected as well. So, we're praying for their safety and we don't want them to be put at risk. So, like I said, I think we're just hunkering down and hoping for the best, really, and making sure that none of those temporary power supplies get affected and cut people off for weeks and weeks again.
Yeah. I'm glad you've got your power back. I'm glad they were watching. If there's any further problems, you know where we are, at your service.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Not at all. Thanks a lot for joining us. Thank you. Coming up in just a few minutes' time, we're going to be joined by the Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, as we get Labour's reaction to the allegations of a party last Christmas in Downing Street. Now, the Prime Minister and his senior ministers have been telling us over the last few days that a party didn't happen. It just didn't happen. What are you talking about? It didn't happen. And whatever was happening at Downing Street was certainly within COVID regulations. I spoke to the Deputy Prime Minister about it just yesterday, and he said definitely didn't happen. A video emerged last night of senior aides at Downing Street who were laughing and joking about how to deal with press inquiries if they were asked about a party at Downing Street. They said that they may describe it as a cheese and wine gathering or that they had gone home. What happens next? Stay tuned and find out.